All right, let's jump into it. So good to see. I think we have, suddenly quite a lot registered, about half from the last session, half new. You don't have to have been to the last one. Actually, this will dive a little bit deeper, but we'll keep it really top line. So yeah, it's going to be a good session. Looking forward to it. So first of all, I'll just give a bit of a context about me. So I've worked within the grocery, beauty, and lifestyle brands for the last almost 15 years now. Prior to that, I was actually a civil engineer working with London Underground, which is obviously a bit different from what I'm doing today. But and I remember at the time, my engineering manager, a little bit confused why I was moving from, working on London Underground to working in field sales, selling yogurt. He said, have you always been passionate about Activia yogurt? But the thing that really kind of compelled me into this, the FMCG world, etc., was really like growing and building brands. But in my roles, I've very much been using data to drive those decisions across these roles that I've been in over the last 15 years. So it made sense as I moved on to basically set up my own thing and really help brands become more data driven in using their data. And so you can kind of see that the kind of brands that I'm working with today are generally brands that really have a lot of capabilities. Is just honing in the right focus of data. Oh. Sorry, 1 second. Someone can't hear. So can I just make sure that everyone's hearing okay? Or maybe it's just one of you, but I don't want to be talking and on mute. Okay, great. Okay. Hopefully, Rachel, you can get to the bottom of that one. Okay. Good stuff. So let's also just take a step back as well, because I think with tools like Google Analytics, in this case, we've all been forced to move over to Google Analytics. And I think it's very easy to start with, particularly if you like this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, look at all these features. We can do this, we can do that. But then, and there's actually a lot of tutorials around that talking about, here are all the features of Google Analytics, what you can do, but not how can I apply this to my e-commerce business, and how can I actually, take the learnings and improve, within the business. So really the goal of this session is to use GA4 explorations to uncover the so what in your e-commerce data. So I've kept it quite focused on three kind of themes today. Now I'll leave a bit of time at the end, because the most valuable part of this is going to be when either now or at another time is to address specific use cases, because it's all very well. I'll be going through some demo data, but it's obviously looking into your own data where you really get the value. But what I will touch on is one, first of all, if you don't trust the data in the first place, that's the key, the thing to start with. So we will, and we touched upon this in the other session, but we'll go a bit deeper in terms of how can I actually trust my Google Analytics for data, and why is revenue from certain channels so high or so low, and we'll touch upon areas of that. Secondly, we'll talk through, obviously we all have many launches or campaigns. So how did my last launch or campaign perform? And what, most importantly, what can I take from that last campaign and apply to future campaigns? And thirdly, how effectively are my visitors moving through the funnel? So across, and this is, I guess, more of an always on approach. So which areas of my site should I be optimizing? So we'll run through that in explorations as well. So reports versus explorations. I think that the easiest place to kind of explain this is talking about the what and the why. So with the reports section, you're getting all the key information of your e-commerce sales, your visitors, what channels have been driving your growth. But explorations really more uncover the why. So why did we see a peak in traffic last week? which channels were driving it. Why did our conversion rate drop last week? Why are my customers dropping off in the customer journey? So explorations just allow you to, with various different layouts that allow you to do that. And I think probably you share this kind of frustration in the same way, because you could do this within Universal Analytics a little bit better, where you could actually click through, from the report section, you could drill down from there. But it's a new way of learning, and there's some good ways that we can approach this to get to the same way. And actually, if anything, you might get to a point where you actually prefer it. So just before I go on, we'll dive into some examples now. Can I just get a sense of where everyone is in using explorations? So have you been into it a lot? Are you first time going in? Have you not even heard of the word explorations? Just do you mind just giving a quick comment in the chat where your experience is? Okay, yeah, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Okay, cool. Great. Okay, that's good. So we're all around the beginner stage, which I think is generally, which is good. It doesn't really matter where we sit. I think it's just good having that knowledge. So, like I said, we'll use actual real life examples. So rather than going through, you can do this with this feature, you can do this with this feature. Actually, what you find with explorations is you're really using I use this one type of chart 90% of the time, and then you use maybe the others 10 to 20% of the time. And some of these I really don't use that much at all. They will be useful when you're really drilling down, but we'll really focus on one aspect of explorations. So let's jump into it. So why is revenue from certain channels so high? How can I trust my Google Analytics 4 data? So just to kind of explain this a bit better, it's better to just jump straight into it with an example. So you should see I'm on a test account here. If you jump over to you can jump over to your version. It's always easier if you've got two screens, but otherwise just follow along on the screen here. A good place to start is to start in reports, and then actually go into traffic acquisition section. If you've modified this, it might be called something different, but generally you'll find the traffic acquisition section. And when you're in there, you might notice, depending on how well how much you use this, something that seems a little bit off sometimes, and you don't really know the next step to actually uncover the why of that. So in this case, this, like I said, this is test traffic, but in this case, we're seeing that unassigned traffic here is really high versus the rest. So I really want to understand what's going on there. And you can do little bits within the main reports section. But where I recommend starting is basically building out, and this can be basically a template for explorations, building out a accuracy check template. So if we head over to explore section, and then you've got these options here. You can start from a pre-built exploration. I usually start from the blank page, so you can start from scratch. And think of this basically like a giant pivot table as standard. On the left-hand side here are your variables. Think of it like you're putting out all your ingredients ahead of cooking. So this is where you add all the dimensions and metrics that you might be using in the chart. This section is where you drag those dimensions and metrics across to populate in this section here. So let's go through what I'd start with is go to dimensions. Remember what we're checking here is the accuracy of our data. So what we want to be looking at is the session channel. Oops, no, session. Sorry, it's the session default channel grouping. So if you type in dimensions, you saw the plus button. Click the session default channel grouping. So that's what you saw before. If you have already got a modified grouping, I'd add that in there. But don't worry if you don't understand what that means. Now, I'd also add in, actually keep to session, would also add in session source / medium and sessions campaign. You're going to import that. And then in the metrics section, you want to add sessions. You want to add purchases and purchase revenue. Okay, I'll leave that there for a second so you can see that. So in the dimensions, you've got default channel group, session source medium, session campaign. In the metrics, you've got sessions, purchase, and purchase revenue. Now we want to drag this over to the right-hand side here. The quickest way, there are 3 ways you can do it. The quickest way, I just double click. So you just double click on each of them. And it's populated into the rows and the values. So I'm actually going to remove, to keep it simple, I'm going to remove the session campaign just because it looks a bit bulky. So what are we looking at here? Well, first of all, before we look at this, I'd recommend clicking, you see the show row sections, expand that out to 500. So you just want to see as many rows as you can. So what we're seeing here is now is the default channel group and the medium that sits in. So remember the thing that I was explaining about with unassigned, we're seeing a lot of traffic in that situation, which was unassigned. Now, what I can see here is that unassigned, there is a lot of not set. Now, whilst there isn't anything today that you can fix on that, if you are seeing a significantly high amount of not set, that's something that's worth looking a bit deep into. For now, we'll just assume that isn't a huge part of your revenue, the not set. But what I notice here is if I go down to unassigned here, I'm seeing FBIG, for instance. Now I know that that's Facebook and Instagram, so that's actually assigned to the wrong channel. So what I'd recommend with this is actually exporting this and going through each of the lines and prioritized by this top sessions and the revenue, and seeing which channels don't match up to where they should. And I'll explain in a moment what we can do about that. The other thing I'd recommend is adding another, so let's call this, you can name this at the top here. So if you double click at the top, you can call it channel accuracy. So the other thing, that's checking against how accurate your channels is. And like I said, I'll show you how to fix that. The second check you'll want to be doing is how accurate is it to your e-commerce platform, Shopify, etc. So what I'd do here is I'd add one more. You can duplicate from here. So click the drop down and click duplicate. And I want to add in one more dimension, which is date. So go into the dimensions and add date. So remember, this left-hand side is just purely to put the ingredients out, and then you still need to drag it onto the rows section. So let's keep this really clean. So what we're trying to do in this tab is understand by day sales. How does that relate to our actual e-commerce sales as well? So this is where I'd remove these, remove the rows, and just add in the date here. Now, by default, Google orders the date not by date, but by sessions. You notice here. So very important that you just, and this is sometimes a bit temperamental, but you just make sure that you're seeing the date by day, so you're seeing in the right order. And again, we're seeing maximum rows. You can adjust the timeline here to your needs. I usually do last 30 days. And then what you want to do here is export that data and check it versus your e-commerce platform. Now, what you'll find generally depending on how you've got your Google Analytics set out, is that it won't match, and you'll sometimes be 20% off sometimes. Now, the reason for that is, let me jump over to the example. Out of the box, Google Analytics won't track, for instance, subscriptions, Facebook and Instagram sales, upsells. There are solutions out there which help you track and feed in the data into Google Analytics correctly. Well-known ones are Elevar, and there are plenty out there which I'll share, and depending on which platform you're using it. But the important thing for now is just to make sure that you're getting as close as you can in terms of the purchases to your main e-commerce sales, so excluding subscriptions, for instance. So let's quickly jump to how you would change this, and we did touch upon this last time in the last session, but I think it's important to cover off how you actually reassign this traffic. So where you see unassigned here, you go to with the default, the session source is FBIG. What you're going to do is go to admin, and then down at the bottom here, you'll see channel groups. You basically create a new channel group. So notice I duplicated that. And then you go to, you want that to, that was basically paid social. So you go to the paid social channel, and then you want to say it includes the source FBIG. So you save that channel and save the group. And then when you go back to this Explore report, you just need to add one more dimension, which is this modified session. Channel. I usually call it copy of, but you want to rename that correctly. And then when you remove this now and replace that in here, oh, sometimes it needs a refresh. It should now be categorized to paid social if I set it up right. Okay, great demo there. That didn't actually work. We'll cover that off separately, but for the interest of moving on, I think it's a really kind of a helpful starting point as a template to call accuracy checks. Okay, let's move on. Any questions at this point? So I think that the key to this is creating that custom channel grouping to fix the historic traffic, updating campaign UTMs so they feed into the right channel in the first place, and then cross-checking that against your sales platform. Right, let's jump into another example. Everyone up to speed at this point? And do say if I'm running too fast or slow or confusing you, not offended, just let me know, because obviously I'll tailor it. So now I want to understand, let's jump back to this question. How did my last launch of campaign perform? What future learnings can I apply? So here I'll jump over to, sorry, just move this out of the way. What I do now is go to your report section and go to e-commerce purchases. Now, there's a trick here which I only learned in the last few weeks. Google loves to hide some features away. What I want to understand here is, you can see quite clearly in this example, is that there's a big peak in traffic on product purchases around the 27th of September. So I want to, obviously there was a big launch there. I want to dig into what was happening there and what was driving it. So what you can actually do is, rather than start from scratch and explore, you can actually recreate this whole thing instantly. And it's in a really random place. So you actually go to the add comparisons, or you can click all users. And down at the bottom here, you'll see an explore button. This is going to convert this whole report into an exploration. Now, the first screen you see, click away from this. You don't need to worry about that. Now, you'll notice here, so you're now seeing each of the tabs that were in that main report. So you're seeing this matrix tab, you're seeing the sales tab, and in a table as well. So in this, I want to understand, okay, well, I'm seeing all my products here at the moment. I want to see the products that were being launched at that time. So I might look at them individually and see that it was a 25th birthday campaign product launch. So what I'll do here is, and this depends whether you're looking at an individual product or you're looking at a category of products you've just launched. You go to the dimensions section and add in item category. And if you double click on that, that will move it over to the rows section. Now, this depends how you've got your e-commerce set up for your website. But in this case, I'm seeing that these are all the new SKUs here, the 25th birthday. So I want to see all the products that launched on that date. So I'm going to filter out all the other products. So what I do here is go down to the bottom of the settings here and click on the plus to the filters, click on item category. And then I'm going to say exactly matches 25th birthday. So now I'm seeing all the items which were for the 25th birthday product line, let's call it. So now I want to, this is useful enough, but now I want to understand, okay, well, what actually drove people to come to the to purchase. So at this point, you could go to your channel groupings. So session default channel groupings. And if you've got that modified one, remember at the beginning, you've recategorized Facebook, etc. Make sure it's all in the right channel, because that's step one. You've got that modified version there as well. And then you can drag this over to the columns to see in a matrix of where most of the traffic was coming from. So let's clean this out and remove the values first. So we just want to see items purchased. And then drag this over to the columns section, the default channel grouping. Oops, that didn't work. Sometimes if you find it doesn't work, you can actually also click from here and add it there. So this still isn't that helpful. It's a bit messy. So what I recommend here is just tidying it up a bit. Okay, first of all, we can actually remove this column here, because we already know that it's 25th birthday. So you can go to the rows and remove the category. And secondly, we want to make sure, always remember, if you've got enough rows, obviously there are only 4 products in this case, but you don't want to be missing out on anything there. And you also want to make sure that you've got the column groups spread out as well, because you're only seeing 5 columns. Again, still not that helpful until you go to, and this is what I really like, is the heat map. And this is a really quick way of looking at each of your products and where most of the purchases were driven from. For instance, I mean, this, like in the demo data, it's only so valuable, but you know, we saw a lot of the traffic, a lot of the purchases coming through direct for each of the products. But what you will find sometimes, and I'll show you an example, is that you'll see peaks in certain bits of traffic. For instance, in this example, we're seeing that email was a big contributor to this product launch or product sales generally. And in this situation, you know, the on-the-side channel had really seen a lot of purchases. So you can see how that's quite insightful information to go, okay, well, we're actually going to invest a bit more in this area. Let's look at this one more way. If you want to see all of your campaign launch and how it performed by channel, you can actually go and let me just show you so you can actually see it. Firstly, what it would look like. So what you're seeing here is the product launch of that example with each of the channels that they sit in, but also the campaign they sit in. So in this situation, we're seeing that we're seeing which channels and which campaigns have driven our sales. So this is super interesting. If you look at this and you say, well, which email campaign really worked well in driving our sales for the launch, which ad campaign worked well in driving our sales. You can basically see it in a table quite cleanly there. So to do this, you basically need channel groups and campaigns. So we're halfway there already. So we go adding campaign, import, and then we're going to remove the column now. And we're just going to add the default channel group. Sorry, actually remove the rows, because remember, we've already got the filter on to say it's for that launch. So we can remove the item name and we can just add default channel group, double click, and session campaign. Yeah, you sometimes see it looking a bit messy. And one more tip on when you're seeing it a bit like this is that you can click nested rows to yes. And usually it cleans it up a bit. It's made it a bit better, but and then you can also close this down, and usually it's not too much better there, but like I say here, you can now see and another quirk, just important to highlight these things. Remember, we've been only shown 10 rows at default to 10 rows, maximize it, and then you'll see everything. In this case, there aren't many anyway. So this is a really helpful report just to, you know, at the end of a campaign, you want to see how a product range has performed. You're seeing it all in one place, all of your campaigns by channel, how many purchases. You can obviously add in other metrics here that are important to you as well. Okay. Any other questions at this point? So we'll move on to how well are our visitors moving to conversion. So this is always another good example of where out of the box Google Analytics isn't that intuitive. But we'll start from the report section and then go to purchase journey. So again, it depends how you've built out this side panel, because you can do that in the library. but generally you'll see it in the life cycle. If you've got life cycle there, monetization and purchase journey. At this point, actually, it is worth highlighting something. This is actually a recent feature. You see sample report and thresholding applied. What does that mean? So sample report basically means that because of the volume of data, it isn't getting the full 100% accuracy, but it's using sample data, so it's a good guide. So in this example, it doesn't really matter because you're not looking at for the 100% accurate numbers, but that's something to kind of keep aware of. The other thing is thresholding. Now, this is a little bit more quirky in the sense that Google withholds some information if it thinks that you can identify the users behind the situation. So a really useful thing before we move on, and this is slightly separate to expirations, is you can actually turn this off. So you basically make sure that your information is 100% accurate all the time. So just jump over to the admin section and head to the data collection tab. What you'll see, this is what I was talking about, is Google collecting data signals from customers. It wants to be able to anonymize those users. And what I do is it's really simple. You just turn that off and make sure you don't include Google signals in the reporting identity. So when you come back to this report here, you'll see at least there isn't the thresholding applied, which means it's 100% accurate data. It's not my day-to-day, isn't it? It hasn't changed, but I think this is because it's a demo account, but usually that would disappear and you're getting 100% accurate data. Okay, let's jump into the example of how people are moving down the funnel. So this is an example of a report which isn't that helpful in itself because you don't know where to start. Okay, well, the abandonment rate is 67%. Okay, great. So what? So, and even in this section, the mobile, desktop, tablet, what are we supposed to use within the information? Now, the good thing is you can get more insights from this when you go into the exploration section. So again, you don't need to start from Explore. You can do that same thing where you go to all users and go to Explore at the bottom here. And this is going to recreate this whole chart in the exploration section. So you'll see this first, click away, don't worry about that. And you'll notice it's slightly different layout, but it's effectively the same information. Good question, Garth. I'll answer your question in a moment, but just to finish off this piece, what you've got in here now is more information that you can help you guide, and understand what's happening. So if you look at this table part of it, we're seeing the how people are moving down the funnel. The default was by whether they're on desktop, mobile, or tablet. So you can see quite clearly here that there's a much higher completion rate down the funnel on desktop than mobile, which is generally no surprises. But what we can do here is actually start to clean it up a bit, and sometimes you'll see smart TV in here. So you can remove these quite simply by right-clicking on that section and exclude these users. So it just a little bit of tidying up there. Let me just run to the example I was wanting to share. So with funnels generally, I think how this works, for instance, is it's built out steps on this side here, which you can amend. So if you don't want to start from the session start, you can remove this section here, and it will just look at that certain stages of your funnel. how this works is based on the events. So for instance, when someone lands on the ad, actually adds a cart, it sends an event to Google Analytics. So this is a great place to kind of, if you want to use it for instance, your email flow, for instance, email pop-ups. So when many of us have a two-step flow where you'll have a pop-up for the email, lead generation, and then you're asked for email address, and then sometimes in the second screen you're asked for SMS. You can also use this funnel for that as well if you've got your steps set up properly. Now, we won't run through how to do that in this session, but I'll just show you an example of what that can look like. So in this situation, we're seeing that same chart, and we're looking at, this is Klaviyo. So for instance, it's showing at the step 1, the pop-up is displayed. Step 2, they opted into email, and step 3, they opted into SMS. So what this is telling us is that 4.8% opted into email from viewing it, and then 77% of those then opted into SMS. Okay, interesting information, but it's only helpful if you're seeing it in context. So what you can do is either change that to versus a previous period. So you're seeing, are we actually trending up or down in our how customers are opting in? But you can also look at it from a breakdown point of view. So actually, which channels are we most effective at generating leads? So in this situation, I've added the session default channel group in the breakdown, and then we can see that in the completion rate here, this is the completion rate to email opt-in. It's highest for paid social, and actually quite low for other channels, quite high for paid search. Now, for paid social, that probably makes sense if you think about it, because how they're browsing on site, they're landing on your website, and not in the mind frame of I'm going to buy right now, but they'll be willing to at least enter their email or SMS. So that makes a lot of sense, I think, and it just emphasizes the importance of looking at breakdowns like this and going, actually, where should we be investing our focus with paid social? Maybe it shouldn't be to drive to sale more. It should be much more around collecting leads because of the mindset they're in during that visit. Just to address a question that Garth asked around the time frame, is the last 28 days the best date window to be looking at for reports like customer journey? It really, the answer is it really depends on the amount of traffic you're going through in the first place. So in general, yeah, it's good to actually really extend it out a bit. Now, as you extend it out, you'll start to get sampling in place, which again isn't a bad thing. So this is based on 100% of available data. So yeah, you can afford to extend it out. But in short, yeah, it's worth kind of broadening the timescales as much as possible, or what you want to be assessing, enough that you can at least compare versus the previous period, for instance. So many of us have only had GA4 installed for, or some of us for a year, but like others for only 6 months or so. So maybe the last 3 months versus the previous 3 months is a great place to start, because then you can start to look at the how you're performing versus previous. One final thing is quite useful is a visualization in the standard versus trended funnel. And this is good because it's showing all your metrics in total users. So what that means is you're seeing on a page how over time, how people are flowing through the funnel. So this is interesting when you might see, say, a peak in view product, but the add to cart or begin checkout has remained the same. So that implies that you got a lot of visitors to your product pages, but something is stopping them from converting. So this is quite a useful one if you're trying to see over time, and same with the email flow example, just how they're flowing through the funnel. So I don't want to actually do another one at this stage, because I think it'll be more valuable to either answer any specific final questions and go through an example of that, or give you an extra 5 or 10 minutes back. I think the most important thing about explorations generally is, it's the second point really, is starting with the questions in mind first and then looking at GeoFor. And that's the case for the previous webinar as well, is that it's so easy to get lost in the data and actually not really know what you're looking for in the first place. But yeah, the clearer you are and what am I trying to understand, then it's easier to go and dig into explorations, etc. Great tip around the reports, starting from the report section and explore. And actually one third important point is shared explorations are view only. To edit it, you have to duplicate. This is a really funny quirk. So for instance, if I go into one of these reports here, I can actually hit, so you get two options. You get export and you get share exploration. This exploration will be shared in read-only mode, which is the most frustrating thing, because if you're sharing it with others, they can't amend that timescale from that report. So you can share that with others, but just remember the person you're sharing that with, assuming they've got access, they'll need to duplicate that report themselves if they want to amend anything, for instance, the times, the dates, etc. So we've kind of done a bit of a dive through accuracy checks, looking at purchases and for instance, particularly product purchases and what's driving those product purchases, which you can actually also apply to blog posts and other campaigns. And then finally, we looked at across the whole funnel of how customers are moving through the funnel and where opportunities are there. But I just wanted to, just check in and see if you had any questions or any use cases that you'd love to run through in this webinar as well.
Hey, James, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, thanks a lot. That was really good. Just learned a few things that I'm trying to find answers for, specifically for e-commerce. I do a lot of
one more thing I will kind of add at the end here is when we were coming back to the this purchase journey trend, is thinking about each stage in the funnel and what actions you can take to improve that. So this is where looking at last 3 months versus the previous 3 months, for instance, if you're seeing a dip in certain parts in this funnel, what are the best actions you can take? So here are some examples of, if they're not moving from visiting your homepage or landing page to the product, that might suggest that the search intent isn't there, or the landing page isn't quite right there. If they're moving down the funnel from view product to add to cart, maybe the value proposition isn't clear enough, or the product description isn't clear enough. If they're moving from add to cart to begin checkout, maybe it's around the transparency of all the costs within it, and maybe there's a requirement to log in. And then finally, just around that begin checkout, is that whole checkout process streamlined?
Hi, James, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Sorry if maybe I've got my volume off.
Thanks, Jody.
Sorry if I talked over you. I might have some issues with my sound as well, so maybe that's what's the problem this side. I apologize. I actually can't hear anyone. So maybe if you were talking all along, I wouldn't have been able to hear you. If it is possible to type in the chat, then that would be amazing. But great. Okay. So how accurate are you finding the Shopify GA4 integration? I think out of the box, okay. Yeah. So the reason why it's not great, and there is actually a good article on this, which I'll share afterwards as well, is because Shopify only feeds the Shopify Google official integration only feeds in a certain amount of information, so it doesn't send all the information. For instance, throughout the checkout. So you're asking about the funnel view. Yeah, you're right. Like even like moving from certain stages, I think it's add shipping information. It doesn't collect that information, so you're not seeing that full info there. The other thing is, it only sends data from the actual what you call web events effectively. So it's not including any subscription events, any upsells, etc. Now there are solutions out there. There are free solutions, there are paid solutions which help to fill that gap. One I use, which is pretty good, is called Slide Rule Analytics. And that's a free app which helps to send all the traffic data there. Another is Elevar, which is a paid solution, and that's much is much more thorough in helping to track that, and also sending information back to your Facebook ad platforms and your Klaviyo, so you can basically get better retargeting as well. But out of the box, the short answer is, yeah, it's okay. It can be better. I'll send some resources on that afterwards. Any other questions that are text only? Because I obviously haven't got any sound. Okay, no worries. Well, let's call it a day today. I'm very happy to answer any questions afterwards. I usually record the odd Loom screencast and to make it easier for individual situations. Obviously, the most the valuable way is to actually have a look at your individual use cases, and I'm very happy to do that. Just reach out to me on details below. Other than that, I hope you found it helpful. Don't get overwhelmed by there's a lot of information in there, but I think the most important thing is starting with those questions and knowing that explorations can answer that. Is just knowing the place to start with there. Cool. All right. Well, have a great morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and we'll catch up soon.